which totally makes sense when you're talking about shooting steel points, but doesn't make sense when you're shooting stone points, and here's why. Stone points versus steel points debunked. There's a ton of information out there that's just plain bad, and also a lot of myths surrounding the use of stone arrowheads, especially compared to steel points. So we're debunking that in this video. The first point to mention is don't take advice on subjects from people that don't actually have experience doing it. So what qualifies me to be able to discuss this subject with you? I have killed over 60 big game animals with primitive hunting implements. I am also the author of this here fine book that many of you are familiar with, The Secrets and Science of Primitive Archery, which has a tremendous amount of scientific data collection in it from the actual hunts that we've conducted. And simply put, you're just not going to find anybody else that has killed as many animals as I have and then collected the data from it. So we're going to roll in with 5 specific key points in the myths and the quotes that I've heard people say before, and we're going to work through them really fast and give you some really solid answers. Number 1, you have to trail animals for very far and basically pincushion them to death, and that animals suffer a long agonizing death when you shoot them with stone points. That one is completely wrong. Stone points kill animals just as quickly and efficiently as steel points do, but there are some differences which we'll be rolling into our next subjects. But to clarify just a little bit more on this, number 1, you have to trail animals very far and all that, that's absolutely nonsense. I have killed a lot of animals, as you know, and if you drive stone points through animals, through their lungs, through their vital organs, it brings them down exceptionally fast with one single arrow. Done it over and over and over and over again, and I do it for a living. So no, you do not have to pincushion and chase them down for days on end. Incorrect quote number 2. Stone penetrates just as good as steel. Now that may sound contradictory to the one that we just talked about, that you don't have to run down and pincushion animals to death with stone points, but the truth is, just because stone doesn't penetrate as well as steel doesn't mean it doesn't kill as efficiently, so long as you get the penetration. But you will see other people say that steel points and stone points get as much penetration as each other, and that's not true, and we've proven that time and again through the books and through the real world hunts. So how we test that and how we really see that is through something that I call the threshold of failure, or the failure threshold, and that simply is you continue to drop performance of the bow or the arrow system, however, the delivery of the projectile, be it stone or steel, and you'll get to a point where you keep shooting slower and slower, and you'll eventually see that steel outperforms, outpenetrates stone projectiles. And why that is because stone has a lot more surface area and a lot more friction. So it simply takes more energy to penetrate. Now, can you penetrate as far as steel points by using stone points? Yeah, so like if you shoot out the other side of a deer, then it doesn't really matter. It was sufficient penetration no matter what. And perhaps you can shoot through and get equal amounts of penetration on any given animal per se, but as you start dropping performance rates down, so this comes into play when people start shooting really lightweight bows or homemade bows that don't shoot very fast, and they've had some success killing animals with steel points, and now all of a sudden they're no longer getting the penetration with stone points. So don't be fooled into thinking that you're going to get the same amount of penetration with stone points that you do steel points, but you need to make sure that your delivery system is optimized to get the full penetration so you get those really quick and efficient kills. So number 3 directly points right back to number 2, which is the penetration needs to be optimized, and so point shape of stone points has to be very sharp and pointed. And then the transition, which is the joint or the hafting between the stone point and the arrow shaft, needs to be very, very slick and smooth in order to get that penetration. So that third point that we just talked about is another one of those reasons that stone points really don't penetrate as well as steel points, although they certainly penetrate enough. But that point needs to be said. In fact, we talk about the point shape, the sharpness, and the hafting transitions a lot in the secrets and science of primitive archery. Number 4, this is one of my favorites that I hear from people that just simply love to argue for absolutely no reason or refuse to accept that stone points could possibly be worth hunting with. They say, if stone is so good, then why doesn't everybody hunt with stone points instead of steel points? Or why is it that when Native Americans got their hands on metal, they started making metal points instead of stone points? So great points here, okay? But it's really missing the point. Steel is absolutely more efficient to make and to use. It's simply easier overall once you have a manufacturing system in place. So stone is really good, but the reasons that steel is better is simply because you can mass manufacture steel points, punch them out on machinery and make them all exactly the same. Then you can also shoot them without having to worry about breaking them. So it really comes down to a manufacturability and the failability of the stone versus the steel. Now that doesn't mean that the stone point isn't a good point to hunt with. It just simply means, obviously, steel is a better choice when it comes to modern mainstream hunting. People that want to hunt with stone points typically are doing it for personal reasons or an enjoyment or an infatuation with primitive technologies. You just simply can't mass produce stone points the same way that you can steel points, and because steel penetrates better, and then also the ferrule that glues onto the arrow, all of that stuff where we talked about the transitions and the hafts and how it's got to be smooth and streamlined so it doesn't hang up, all of that stuff is really easy to manufacture once you've come up with a really nice steel point design. Then you just make it over and over, and you basically cut out all the things that could go wrong for the consumer, because everyone's the same. You stick them on the end of the arrow, you go shoot them, where that's not the same with stone points, because if you have people making stone points, you might have them improperly sized, improperly shaped at the tip. You might have them terribly dull, too thick, poor transitions. Main reason, again, manufacturability and reliability overall to the general consumer. Obviously, steel points are significantly more efficient in that manner. Okay, lastly, and we talk about this one a ton in the book as well, but I see this on the internet, and that is people that are still focused on steel points when they think about stone points, and that is, they say, if you want better penetration with a stone point, you need to shoot a really big point. Now, the idea of this is because of the Dr. Ashby reports, which totally makes sense when you're talking about shooting steel points, but doesn't make sense when you're shooting stone points, and here's why. Stone is far less dense than steel. So in order to get a very heavy weight out of stone, it needs to be exponentially bigger than the steel point is. So you can really stack some weight with a steel point very quickly without changing the size of the point significantly compared to stone. Proportionately, the stone point has to get very large to start growing in smaller incremental steps to gain more weight. And so because of that, you're adding a lot more friction, and the negative effects of the friction, so this is a very important point, the negative effects of friction are greater than the positive effects of the kinetic energy and momentum that you get from a larger stone point. Because the point has to be so large that the friction is so much that it overpowers any of the gains that you would have seen from kinetic energy and momentum. So when people think, okay, they see those little tiny arrowheads and they'd call them bird points, those really aren't bird points. It makes no sense to make points to shoot birds with. You can just shoot those with blunts on the end of your arrows, just not even anything on the arrow. Just make the arrow and shoot it, and you can kill birds with those, and small game and what have you. But the little ones, those are true arrowheads, and you can use them for everything on up to bison. So there's that misconception that the larger the animal that you're hunting, the larger the stone point you need, and actually it's quite the opposite. on the smaller animals, you can get away with the larger points that take more energy to penetrate, but they don't have to go in as far. So you can actually hunt small game or medium-sized game with some slightly larger points and still get significant penetration to bring them down efficiently. But you start getting into those bigger animals, and you're going to find that you need those little stone points to actually get the full penetration. And you don't need a big point to kill an animal. You can take a point that's no bigger than the size of the tip of your index finger, and you can put that through the lungs of a bison, and you can kill it relatively efficiently. And putting a point that size through something the size of, say, like a deer, just something that's about that size, will bring it down just as quickly as shooting it with a 300 grain steel broadhead. I promise you, because we've done it over and over and over. So that point wrapped up is simply, you don't need a large point to kill a large animal. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You will fail to penetrate the animal with that really large point. Alright guys, hopefully we were able to debunk some of the stone versus steel point myths, and if you've been following my channel or you own my book, then you already know this kind of stuff, but this is great for people that aren't as familiar with primitive archery or hunting with stone projectiles. So we do these videos to try to help you out so you can be the best primitive hunter and builder that you can be. And again, if you don't have the book, there's a tremendous amount of information in here that you'll probably find very, very valuable, and you can get that at HuntPrimitive.com. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you back here at the Hunt Primitive YouTube channel for some of our future adventures.